Good evening, everybody. I am John O'Loughlin. Welcome to McDuff Lives. And it's a Wednesday night trio, and it's a reunion that we've had this trio before, but it's been like maybe a year and a half or 2 years. And it's just great to have Bill Taylor back with us and the great George Webb. So, gentlemen, welcome. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing good. I can't believe how long we've been doing this now. I think started watching George in 2017, I think it was.
Yeah,
Must be early 2017, and I think he even started before that. But yeah, it's a long time.
With you two guys, though, I feel like I'm on Gibson Island already. I feel like I've teletransported. I'm there at the conferences. We're going to talk about tetraethyl lead. We're going to talk about Goering and the Luftwaffe and all the Nazi Union Bank stuff and Brown Brothers Harriman. I can't wait.
Boy, we tried so hard to get to Gibson Island, and you know it was a closed community, one causeway to get on, and you had to go through a gate, and we couldn't get on there. But we said we're going to get on a boat and go there anyway.
Yeah, we did the Russian retreat, and yeah, all of that is still. Look at the Russians are always the card they play at the election year. So I love all the research we did because it's cumulative, you know.
It is, and also it's good to get to know people over a good period of time. And Bill Taylor, how are you? And well, let's think of a topic to start with. I'm going to let you deal the first card.
Yeah, no, I'm doing good. I've been busy ever since the COVID plague ended. My business has picked up. We had some soft years there because of the COVID economic lockdown caused us to have to regrow the business. So I haven't been putting out too much stuff lately. Also, I'm having technical difficulties. But when I do put out stuff, I try and I'm able to do Twitter more often now rather than sort of the longer essays. But yeah, we start with Gibson Island because I had a recent run-in with a Gibson Island character on Twitter, and maybe it's relevant here. It's always relevant when it's Gibson Island.
Oh yeah.
So give us the juice, man.
Just mention it. And some of you may have played along in the audience, but there was people are probably familiar with the Jefferson Morley, the JFK. Writer, assassination, conspiracy writer, but he's a mainstream type guy. He's an establishment writer. And so a couple of months ago, he was on the William Ramsey podcast, and he said something about, now I'm going to get the name wrong. Not Angleton. Who was the other? I'm completely.
Wisner?
Not Wisner, CIA guy, Iran, the gentleman who was.
Kermit Roosevelt.
No, the other one.
Atlee Phillips?
No, he was a CIA director, became Helms. I'm sorry, it was Richard Helms. So
he's all hour. Oh, dude.
Yeah. I hear I live right on the beach now, and I hear the Blackhawks going up to New York right now, or it could be an Osprey with the sound. I don't know if you guys can hear it over.
Is that getting the perk walk, you think? No.
Well, you see, when you see the Ospreys, you know the president's in town, and they make a loud noise. But anyway, so Jefferson Morley is on the William Ramsey podcast. He happens to mention that he's written a book about Richard Helms, just like he wrote a book about Angleton. And he says that Richard Helms first met the Shah of Iran in 1973 when he became ambassador to Iran. And I said, it could be 73. People have said as early as 1933 when they went to the Swiss finishing school together. But I was able to track down, and it wasn't that hard. I just read Helms's biography that Helms and the Shah first met in 1957. It was probably even earlier than that. So I caught Jefferson Morley in a lie, and he tried to deny it was a lie. But I'm more suspicious now than I am of Jefferson Morley. And the Gibson Island connection is that his uncle was a reporter and editor of the Washington Star, Felix Morley. And he was sort of a leader of the conservative movement before Felix Morley was, before sort of the Buckley brigades came in the early 60s. And he was kind of an isolationist. But Felix Morley is from Gibson Island. He was friends with Stringfellow Barr. He was friends with Rexford Tugwell, who was a New Dealer and wrote the new Constitution. So, to see that Jefferson Morley could be called out on either he's a very sloppy researcher because you just had to look at the biography that Helms wrote, or he's trying to screw up somebody's timeline. And I suspect it's probably the timeline he's trying to screw up rather than just being sloppy, because he gets published by the major houses and they have all kinds of fact checkers and stuff. But this one part about when the Shah and Helms met, he really screwed it up. And now I don't trust him about anything.
Well, 57 in Iran would have been about the time that Eisenhower was rolling out Atoms for Peace, and Iran was their big partner in the Middle East. So that would have been something that the State Department would have been all up in, really involved in. So to miss that, because 16 years later, and then Mossadegh had just been, 4 years before that. So what kind of follow-up reconstruction would they have had for the Shah, the State Department, and Morley? Was his dad in the State Department or his brother?
Jefferson Morley's uncle Felix was a Gibson Islander, and he was a writer. So he's connected, all connected into the Gibson Island gang. He actually wrote a book called Gumption Island, which I have somewhere.
That is a hard one to believe that he would miss that one. Iran was pretty big nuclear partner. I think they were the number one nuclear partner for Atoms for Peace.
That's interesting. I did not know that, because 57 is an important year. That's the year that at the Naremco, or I'm sorry, NUMEC was formed in Pennsylvania. You have this gentleman named the American Nazi Party was formed that year, and that plays into some things that come in later, because you need some Nazis to blame or to mess up the works if anybody in Pittsburgh at the plant goes AWOL and you have to take them out. You just get a nutty Nazi to do it. There's a number of different. I think that might have been the year that John Kerry's father started looking for heavy water for the Israeli nuke program as a sort of brokering heavy water with the Norwegians, and I think that's when the nuke plans really ramped up in 57.
We went out there in our last charrette that we did in Pittsburgh, and because of you, and we went over to the shipping port where they had the first nuclear reactor where Jimmy Carter was and all that. And then we went up to NUMEC where Zalman Shapiro stole the uranium, and metal uranium, folks, not the depleted uranium that went missing. Spiked it. This is the juice right here. So I remember that. And if anybody doesn't know this already, Bill wrote a book about all this. So if you get lost in the names, he's the Braided Belt book is how I think of it, Braided Belt. But
yeah, if you go to a website, you should be able to find them. I have updating to do, but I actually had some updating to correct as well, just because for like technical problems or somebody came in and took everything. But all these names are available. I mean, it's hard to keep track of these names, so I try and write them down or write about them. But they're all sort of connecting, and it becomes relevant to today. And I brought up a number of times. Bill de Blasio, mayor of New York City, who's a big buffoon, and everybody thinks is just a buffoon by birth. He comes from a very, very CIA family. His uncle actually wrote. His uncle George Wilhelm, not George de Blasio, but George Wilhelm wrote the memoirs for the Shah of Iran, and he was working in Tehran at the Tehran University in 56, 57. And Bill de Blasio's father worked for Texaco. The mother worked for the World Bank. There's, so you can see, 60, 70 years later, how, they're used to playing a part. And de Blasio certainly played a part in the pandemic panic, especially in the New York City area. I mean, he ramped it up very good. Banning people from meeting, and Elmhurst Hospital is a disaster. We're all going to die. He turned it up to 11 during the pandemic.
Well, and John, if you guys have been following Nazi paperclip conspiracy, or just called the paperclip conspiracy, here's a book that's $345 on Amazon. You can't get it in audio, but you can get John O'Loughlin performing, paperclip conspiracy. Tell me that's possible in any world for free. It is possible, is it not, John? Am I telling the truth?
This book, Paperclip Conspiracy, I don't know how rare it is, but it was a British author, written and published in '87, before Annie Jacobson was anybody, and before she wrote her book called Operation Paperclip. And I think his title is much more appropriate, Paperclip Conspiracy. And as we've been reading through it, and I read a portion of a chapter, and then I stop and talk about it. You know how I am, and got to make my comments. But the portions that I've read have been just, I couldn't stop reading them. I wanted to finish the book last month, but I've still got more I've really got to do, because you see that it wasn't just an oops, look what happened situation. There was a conspiracy to violate the immigration laws of the United States, under the theory that national security trumps everything, and I get to define what national security is. So, I mean, there it is right there from you talk about 1947 and to now. That's the justification for everything that's going on right now, from the bioweapons to the lockdowns to the CDs, the central bank digital currency, everything. As I mean, this is fifth generation warfare, and we're the people that the war is against.
Well, what I loved about your reading, John, and I didn't see every chapter, but I saw a lot of them in Paperclip Conspiracy. And what I loved about it was how you traced all the guys that your dad was involved in during the Kennedy administration, because they're going up against Otepka. They're going up against Otepka. Otepka's putting all the Nazis in, and he's saying all the New Dealers are Russian spies, right? And you trace it back, and a lot of these guys in the State Department in the 60s got their start back with the Joint Intelligence Operation, the JOIA.
Yeah.
And I think Rusk was in that, working for a guy named Patterson, or one of those. I heard one episode. I think I remember that.
Yeah, it's interesting to think of Rusk being in the in the beginning of this stuff back in the early 50s, like 51 or so, and then come in and plays a role as an advisor to Bobby Kennedy, as you've been reporting during the Otepka affair. So he, on the one hand, let's look at this employee of the State Department. His name was Sam. What was it? Strauss? No, I think it's Sam Klaus. Anyway, he was a Jewish State Department employee who was against bringing in the Nazi paperclippers. So Dean Acheson of the State Department got rid of him. Just said, well, this guy's in our way. And it's just like Otepka. They got rid of Otepka in the story that you reported. Well, this guy named Sam, I think it's Klaus. Yeah, Sam Klaus. They just got rid of him because he was not letting them bring in the paper clippers, even because he said, hey, you can't just violate the immigration laws of the United States. And the State Department said, well, yes, we can.
I'm looking at a book here called Blacklisted by History, and it's the untold story of Joseph McCarthy. And I guess this is told inside there. But what, especially researching your dad, and I know Bill's done just tremendous stuff with like Pete Bagley and all these CIA guys that were in this fight between the FBI and the CIA in this early 60s type time frame. Your dad was working with Rusk, and he was working with McGeorge Bundy, I believe, and that was kind of the Cuba working group. And the CIA guys had botched the Cuba thing with Bay of Pigs, and then so Bobby Kennedy gets assigned right after that to do it the right way, and they're going to do this invasion. And so this is where Saxa gets involved, the special operations that your dad's running, and he's right in this whole thing. I mean, so like, you know, the investment anybody made in reading John's book, the McDuff Lives book, it leads right into Bill's book, which Bill is talking all about how, like you mentioned, Tugwell. Tugwell kind of is a new dealer because he sidles up next to FDR, but then Tugwell goes into business with Robert Mueller's father, the DuPont guy. And DuPont's getting all the secrets, all the military war machine secrets from the Nazis, and DuPont's the one who's cashing in on all this stuff. So, and they go into the specialty metals business with the beryllium and the zirconium and all the specialty metals for the nuclear industry right after World War II. So it really, this whole time frame, 47 after the Cold War, Truman, up until your dad and Kennedy, even maybe even through Dean Rusk being the Secretary of State all the way to 69, is a fascinating period of history because they're recasting the new dealers as communists, and they're recasting the German scientists as well. Sometimes they're saying they're Polish defectors, or sometimes they're even saying they're Jewish Holocaust survivors. It's a crazy time. It's really cool to research.
Well, the military is seriously part of it. You know, when I was first, you know, starting into looking at it, I was thinking, well, this is the CIA. This is all of those, you know, secret operators, you know, from London School of Economics. They think they know smarter than everybody else, and they can run special ops and, you know, conquer countries. But no, it was the military that really wanted those scientists. The military wanted, you know, the best planes, the best bombs, you know, the best bomb sites, of course, with Symington and all. As far as bioweapons are concerned, that's the same story. You know, George, when you said, I guess 3 or 4 weeks ago, your conclusion that the bioweapons were created, you know, during World War II or before World War II, especially the ones that are going to attack the immune system and make people vulnerable to things like cancer. That made so much sense to me. And now I'm seeing, you know, if we go back, you know, to the financing, and of course it's been, you know, 5 years since I realized that Wall Street was financing, you know, both sides of the Russian Revolution and the Nazis, and you know, it's all business. It's all business as usual, as Charles Higgins's book calls it. I was talking with Yuri Roshka yesterday about how, you know, in Russia, you know, it's the same thing. The Putin, you know, a lot of people think, well, he's going to save us from the horrible West, but no, I mean, he is kind of a puppet too. He's got his oligarchs that are around him, and what I also hadn't realized that he also has a real Zionist clique around him. This fellow named Lazar, who I'd never heard of, and so it gets into the Chabad Lubavitch story, and you start thinking, geez, it's everywhere. It's, you know, we've got it in our State Department. Putin's got it in his closest advisors, Zelensky, you know, and Netanyahu. And where does it stop? Is the world getting taken over by Zionism? Either of you guys want to comment on that?
I'll let Bill have a crack at that first.
Yeah, I wouldn't even call it Zionism. I mean, yeah, you could argue that. I think it's a very, very small. I mean, you could probably call me a Zionist, or at one point could have called me a Zionist. And, it's my understanding that the largest group of Zionists are evangelical Christians. But it's, I think it's a very small, much more elite group than really just the Zionists. And I think you could trace it back 300 or 400 years, and all these families they only marry themselves. So it's not like you're enveloping a bunch of people into this that don't deserve it, or and also make it difficult to have like intellectual discussions about it. It's I was just there's another sort of famous Twitter guy who's always railing against the Zionists, and I pointed out, he's casting a broader net, and it doesn't necessarily help the discussion when, if you just look at, well, this family is married to this family, and they only marry this family. And I'm talking about the Rothschilds. I'm talking about the Perea family, which is also Perry. The Kuhn-Loeb families. They're all intricately connected, and they don't have a problem throwing the rest of the minority religion over the ship to save their butts, or to make a lot of money. It's just the McCarthy hearing. Just to go back to that, the McCarthy hearings are kind of interesting because, for one, a lot of it takes place at Fort Monmouth, which is right down the street from where I grew up, and a lot of the gentlemen who got pulled into this, who lived in these average size houses in my neighborhood. This is before I was born, but there's sort of the first generation from Eastern Europe that came over. But the guys sort of pulling them into the mess, or really directing things, have been in this country for 100 or 200 years. And it's the Kuhn-Loeb gang, or the Rothschild gang. And they're sort of making these more recent arrivees, the patsies, for all their nefarious deeds. Sort of like the Rosenbergs, who may or may not have been guilty of some things, but they certainly weren't they certainly weren't contracting to have devices stolen from Fort Monmouth, or in one case, Harry Gold was stealing medicine and solvents from a sugar factory in Pennsylvania. They would get these new guys and compromise them, especially somebody like Harry Gold, who was not married, a bachelor, as they used to say, and get him to steal this stuff. But but that's as far as it went. It never went above the Rosenbergs or Harry Gold, and these sort of elite families are the ones who got all the riches and got away scot-free.
Yeah, the Monmouth spy ring was huge, and they were, all of the atomic secrets. You look at the Oppenheimer and whatnot. There was a Russian agent named Zarubina that met with Oppenheimer every Sunday. And went to his picnics and had the open meetings where the discussions and everything. And they were sending a packet back from Los Alamos to New York. And I think it stopped in Monmouth for some reason. The train stopped in Monmouth. I remember that. Right. And then they would spy camera everything and then send it on to wherever it was supposed to go, to the Manhattan Project, to Klaus Fuchs, probably, because he was in Bob Mueller's when they had the Manhattan Project in the Woolworth building. That was Bob Mueller, again, Bob Mueller, DuPont, with all the clicky-click cameras. And then Klaus Fuchs in England was doing the same thing, sending the Soviets the thing. So it's obvious that they want the Rothschild teeter-totter. They want both sides to be threatening each other. That's where they spend the most amount of the GDP, on fearing the other person, right? That's why you do a Cold War. You make so much money. And that's why I like your book. I mean, your book is sort of you have a lot of people in your book. You have like Mark Kulak has a big index, an A to Z index. Right. And your book's a lot like his website. It has a lot of people and a lot of definitions, and so you can really kind of. Do you have an alphabetical index in Braden Bell?
I think so. I had to pack away a lot of this stuff, but yeah, I mean, there's alphabetical in this, and it's because you see a name. I remember names. I don't remember faces. So you see a name in one spot, like the de Blasio family, Warren Wilhelm, 52, Iran. What the hell is he doing there? Well, but then he shows up in 61, and then all of a sudden it's, de Blasio's uncle, and he's screaming. So it's, it seems like an impossible task to sort of take down this network or even comprehend the network. But that's what they would say about mafia families. But they would draw the chart, they would draw the tree, and this is the capo, and this is the soldiers, and these are the middlemen, and this is the conciliary, and then this one shows up at this one's funeral, or this is the godfather of the baby, and they don't stray far from who they know at all. So it becomes easier to trace, and that's why I put those indexes together, because I would just come across one name, like how do I know that name, and all of a sudden it's a name that name of a relative who had something tragic to do with the JFK assassination or something.
Well, I see Deborah talking about the Oppenheimers in South Africa that were mining uranium, and was he connected to make sure that South Africa got the uranium secrets? And it just seems like DuPont kind of made a market with Tugwell and Mueller, in all these specialty metals and all these, like you were saying, that the Rosenbergs for the explosive lens, the Crytron trigger, all these things. Mm-hmm. Salman Shapiro was sending all that back to Ben Gurion, right? And Ben Gurion also was trying to get the bio secrets as well. So this whole area of espionage. And the reason I mention it is because I got this book, Ordeal of Otto Otepka, and this is from Otepka's point of view. But
is that the Gill, the GI?
Gill, yeah.
Yeah, Gill, yeah.
And the reason why I'm enjoying the book is it's all written from his point of view, Otepka's point of view, but it shows you how the control point, the choke point, where everything funnels in is through this Office of Security. And the part I remember so well with John going to the trials in DC and the trials in Virginia, somebody mentioned the Assange trial. How many people actually went to his extradition trials? John and I went there with what's her name, and in going to the archives with John and going to the George Washington University archives and so forth, we really got a feel for how everything funneled through this Office of Security. And John's dad, McDuff, Tom O'Loughlin, was on the case. He was focused like a laser in on this Office of Security, because this is the control mechanism, the way you can either look the other way and bring the Nazis in, right? Which he thought was for the good of fighting Russians and communism. And then you can really be a bastard and look for little thing that's wrong with somebody to keep them out. And they were getting rid of new dealers. And so I look at Alger Hiss, right, and say, this is a new dealer that they made into a Russian. Here's a guy who's working for Oliver Wendell Holmes, and he's, the top of his class at Harvard, and he comes up with the WHO, not to control and lock down people, but he comes up with the WHO to share information about world pandemics. That's kind of what we thought it was going to be. He comes up with the UN Security Council so we can avoid future wars. Not a bad idea after World War I and World War II. Right. And they make him out to be the Russians are in the State Department, and they convict him with a typewriter that didn't exist for 7 years later. But then they do it again. And I'm going back to McCarthy. They do it again with McCarthy, and Nixon was the first one to make their money on being a red baiter, pointing out the Reds in the State Department. But then Joe McCarthy picks up on Nixon's pattern. And this is sort of the deflection or the diversion in order to bring these Nazis in, right? All the time they're saying, watch out for all the communists in the State Department. They're bringing in Nazis. Nixon's a big part of that. And guess what? They're, like you're saying, Bill, they do the nasties early on when they're underlings. They get to be made president later on, as long as they don't say anything against the deep state. So I think this is a really great part of history. If you get John's book, wait, I'm backwards because of the camera. If you get Bill's book and get John's book, the two of them together are kind of a nice volume for this period of time, talking about the characters and people and the drama that's going on here at the Office of Security.
May I just say, George, that your work on what really was going on with Alger Hiss and the Security Department, the SY Department with Otepka, has really opened my eyes, and I think a lot of people could benefit from studying it from your perspective, and that is, you know. The LaRouche and Schiller people have always said the same thing, and that is that these FDR programs were put in with the best intentions, with the idea of running them for the benefit of people that were in developing countries, to let them develop, to give them the support that they needed, the financing that they needed to build their infrastructure, to electrify, to do all the things that it takes to make an independent economy. And that was what these institutions were built for. The World Health Organization is an example. It was never meant to be a totalitarian dictatorship run by a warlord from Ethiopia. I mean, nobody ever conceives that would be a good idea, except for the present management. And they think it's a good idea. But to get back to what I was saying about Alger Hiss and the State Department, that the cleverness of setting up Joe McCarthy, because Joe McCarthy, I think, was kind of a bumbler. He was a drinker, and he was a good time guy, and so they put him in the position of being the bad guy, and he played the role of bad guy so well that the American people turned on him. We have no decency. And so he had no decency. And so, so now we got rid of that whole part of the country that would have supported the idea of the nation being a sovereign nation and not deferring to the UN and not becoming involved in all of these, multinational projects and going out trying to save the world, all of these things that the American people were basically conservative up until the 50s, and it was the Cold War which they manipulated in such a way as to turn the American people against real conservatism and turning them into just an anti-communist knee-jerk reaction. And that, of course, has created a severe blowback from the liberal side. So to the extent that now people who are just, your average MAGA person, your Make America Great Again, I just want America to be America again. I want to have, borders. I want to have a president that secures our country and keeps our industry and everything going well. I want to have that good America that our grandparents dreamed of. And these people are now the villains in the media. These are, the white people are the enemy. And, guns, white people, and climate change is, the whole agenda of a whole large part of America. And it was the Dulles brothers. It was Sullivan and Cromwell that schemed all this stuff out. And I didn't see it, but you did, George. So I appreciate very much the opportunity to go back and see the 50s from your perspective. It really is helping me.
Well, and there's this other guy that, again, your dad's on this case, which is they're rinsing these Nazis, if you remember, through Poland to make them look like, like these Prussian Junkers. They're trying to make them not look like Nazis. They're trying to make them look like Junkers, and they're bringing them through. And there's this guy Gulanowski who comes over, I think in 1961, and says, "Hey, this Kissinger guy is loading you up with a whole bunch of these, communists." And, he's trying to give a list of all the Kissinger communists that Kissinger's putting in the State Department, because Kissinger wants some loyalists that are going to have a deep state footprint in the State Department. And your dad's involved in that case too. And Bill writes about that because Bill writes about Pete Bagley as a CIA guy doing these debriefings for Angleton, right? When and the CIA is putting them out in these little places, homes out in Maryland, remote, and they won't let them talk to Congress or the FBI. So,
yeah, he wanted to go and ask. He wanted to talk to J. Edgar Hoover. That was, he came over wanting to talk to the FBI because he knew that, look, isn't it interesting, when we think about the FBI versus the CIA, and what is that except for the old American empire against the new American empire, right? I mean, the old American empire is J. Edgar Hoover considered himself to be like the emperor of everybody referred to the FBI headquarters as the seat of government, the SOG, the seat of government. And that was his attitude. He thought he had, the power handed to him from the official, imperial sources going back to, the Charles Bonaparte and the European power. And then you have the new empire, which is the empire of technocracy, the empire of the New England wasps that are going to take over from the old empire. And it becomes clearer and clearer to me that the people, we the people, are the force that's we're not in the game. It's between one bunch of imperialists and another bunch of imperialists, and all the rest of us have somehow become pawns and no longer have the power to run plays, to build things, to make a difference, to change things for the positive. I mean, we laugh about Phil Murray. We talk about de Blasio. We commiserate about how stupid a lot of the leaders that we're stuck with are, and maybe they're just plain stupid. Like half the time Biden seems to be right on the ball and knows exactly what to say. Boom, 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 boom. But then they show him as this complete nincompoop. And are they not just trying to tell us that, we're never going to know who's in charge? You're going to always be a proletarian, like people use the word proles now, like we're all just proles. We're all just serfs. We're all powerless. The people have got to do something. We got to do some of that we the people stuff, right, Bill?
Yeah. And that's you bring up a lot of interesting points. What's interesting, you actually, George, mentioned Alger Hiss, and that's why I think somebody's, looking at the history of the parents of some of these people that are, goofing around right now, the de Blasios and the Murphys. You get the idea that, okay, this Phil Murphy's not as dumb as he's acting, and de Blasio is not just bloviating because that's his natural state. They're playing a part. And you go back to George's school play, and Marie de Blasio, his mother, becomes an interesting pivot because a couple of people mentioned or connect to her pretty directly. I mean, her reference in her FBI file was Whitaker Chambers, so the accuser of Alger Hiss, and she worked for him at Time Magazine for the years leading up to World War II. So, that's a nice little connection right there. But then you have guys like Phil Murphy, and everybody in this state is convinced that Phil Murphy is just an idiot. I mean, he's an idiot, but he's also playing a role. He's playing a part. And I've done a lot of work on not necessarily his family, but his wife's family, and they're CIA all the way. I mean, I just put a Twitter piece out. It shows that there's another Patsy in Dallas that day. I think it was his name is Malcolm Jerry Hoy. He would have been I think he's Lee Harvey Oswald's backup Patsy, because he comes across as a kind of a nutty guy. But his references from Tammy Murphy's uncle, and another person in the Tammy Snyder Murphy family. So she's actually running for Senate in New Jersey, and she'll probably win because the New Jersey GOP is incompetent. But everybody's screaming about nepotism, but this is a real deep stater. She comes from real CIA bona fide Kennedy era skullduggery, and it's important just to not just look at her as a sort of a platitude spewing liberal, which she's good at, but she's also got these connections to these institutions and these agencies that can actually do real damage. It sort of made the effort to make New Jersey not just a local issue, but to point out that the crimes of the Murphy family go all the way back to at least the Kennedy administration, when this guy Malcolm Jerry Hoy was running around Dallas making up stories for the FBI and shooting up his boarding room when playing the nut. He actually went to the movies that day too, just like Lee Harvey Oswald. But there's I think the effort helps identify who these people are and gets. Ideally, it wakes at least somebody up to the idea that de Blasio is not just a buffoon and Murphy's not just a drunk, but they're well-connected, real players that actually have power because of their familial connections that go back decades.
Well, you said it. You said LHO. So I get to talk about the guy who made a report on LHO in 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, and 63. Wow. Otepka is making reports all along the way and tracking and tracing Oswald through his whole career. And he knows, for instance, Oswald gets his visa in one day in Helsinki. Remember, he's coming back from Russia. He comes through Helsinki. Yep. And he's like, hey, this should be on your watch list. Is he a fake? Because the FBI was running like, when they were talking about the Cassidy's run, they were running fake defectors into the CIA. And they were like, hey, is this a fake defector or not a fake defector? What's going on here? But Otepka is the guy. And if you remember, this is why when John showed me that picture of his dad at the New York, in Long Island, not Long Island, but, at the World's Fair up there at Flushing Meadows. Yeah. Yep. Summer of 62. Right. I think it was.
That was 64, I think, or 65, actually, the picture just for the.
Was it later? Okay.
Yeah.
But when I saw that, I saw a wink in his eye. Because are you going to, if Otepka at the Office of Security, and he worked with the FBI on all these clearances, if he wrote that many memos about Oswald, and now here comes Oswald, and he comes over on a ship he didn't fly in, he comes over on a ship into New York Harbor, you're not going to meet Oswald if you're FBI. There's a guy who was at the U-2 base in Atsugi in Japan, and then he's in at the Russian radar factory when the U-2 gets shot down. Give me elevation, give me the flight path. I can shoot it down. I don't have to be close with an SS missile. And then that guy is going to come back, and IB Hale in Dallas wants to put him into the U-2 reconnaissance top secret clearance at Yeager's in Dallas. He takes a plumbing job for 6 weeks, for whatever reason, but then he jumps into Yeager's. The FBI is not going to say, wait a minute, we're about ready to go to war with Cuba, and we probably don't want the guy who was so closely. Gary Powers thought Oswald was responsible for his shoot down. Right? So we probably don't want that guy doing the U-2 interpretation for the invasion that McDuff's planning right about now with Victor Krulak and Lansdale, right? Let's not have the Russian spy be put right into the U-2 and photo interpretation just right now. This is why I say, and then there's Operation Mongoose. that was all the 544 Camp Street and all that. And that was Lansdale as well, running with the 488th Intelligence Wing, half of the Dallas Police Department, were the 488 doing Operation Mongoose. This is why I say McDuff knew Oswald and was looking into Oswald and looking into Ruby before the assassination, because he's looking into Mongoose. Who are these jamokes who are doing all these Task Force 33 and who are doing these missions and flying C-123s at water level out of New Orleans over and spraying stuff? Bill Patrick at Fort Detrick talks about preparing various chemicals for these missions. Task 33B. Hey, somebody's got to. Hey, we're the president. We're the ones who do the invasions. We're the ones who are the commander in chief, not you guys down here in Dallas, not you guys in the 488. Right? This is why I say McDuff knew Lee Harvey Oswald and was investigating him. And Ruby, remember, was running guns. They were caching weapons in Cuba for the next thing in Cuba. This is why he, in David Wise's book, I think it's David Wise's book, where he says McDuff was looking into Ruby and he was looking into Oswald for the Warren Commission report. I believe that was in the David Wise book. And I think this is, if we can find this out, and then Yuri Nasenko, sorry, I'll stop my speech here in a second, but Yuri Nasenko is also the guy that comes in and he's intercepted by the CIA, and they won't let him talk to Hoover either. And he's held over in Maryland by, his lordship's kindness over whereby McDuff is buried. Like there's like 400 feet between where Nasenko is interrogated and where McDuff's buried. I've been there with the gravesite with John, right? You know damn well that they were going to drop the dime and tell McDuff and the Kennedy and all of them about what they were doing. Russian intelligence is on the ground in Cuba. So they've got the intelligence of what they're dumping, what Lansdale's dumping in the C-123. Right? And the doctor, I can't remember the doctor who was in Dallas, who figured, who had the evidence of Lansdale dumping the nerve agent or the VEE, but he ended up doing the diagnosis of the kid. Some kid dies back in Dallas of this agent that's from Fort Detrick. And he was also, how did they place that Cuban doctor back in Dallas, back at the 488? Unless Russian intelligence is there on the ground and they see what's hitting, they see what's coming out of the clouds, they sequence it and say, let's prove that the Americans were doing bioagents to try to overthrow Castro. Right? We'll send the Cuban doctor who knows how to diagnose this equine encephalitis. We'll send him back to Dallas, and he'll be the one who figures out how to save the kid. None of the doctors in Dallas could figure out how to save the kid, right? And this Cuban doctor, where the C-123 was going over Cuba, he's the one who does the diagnosis. That's just too much mathematical impossibility for me. How could he be there and seeing this rare bioweapon by Lansdale, Task Force 33, it's called? How could he then be the doctor that gets placed and does the diagnosis? And the kid almost died, but because he got the good diagnosis from the Cuban doctor, he lives. I'll get you the reference and get you the book of this. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just surprised at all this. I didn't know any of this, George. I'd love to know more about it. Especially the idea of Lansdale being involved in a bio warfare type of attack, because the whole reason that Kennedy started SACSA was to get rid of Lansdale. He didn't like Lansdale, and Lansdale did some really, really nasty, awful stuff, in the Philippines and in Vietnam. And as you know, Lansdale was the guy that organized the shipment of like 200,000 North Vietnamese Catholics down into the Saigon area, who basically had nothing to do except for to try to get some food. And so they had to get some guns to try to get some food. And then the next thing you know, everybody was calling them the Viet Cong. Hey, see, we're going to shoot you. Well, and That's what happened. And this was Lansdale. And so I think it's a good thing to think that that Kennedy wanted to get rid of Lansdale, because he was a nasty guy with no limits whatsoever, and he was trained by the British.
So
I just mentioned Lansdale was on a Taylor mission to Vietnam, which was the mission that report was written to try and convince Kennedy to commit more men in arms to South Vietnam. The guy who wrote the report was Pete Bagley's brother, Worth Bagley, Admiral Worth Bagley, or captain at the time. And Bagley brings in another Russian defector named Derbyev to meet. He proposes to the FBI that Derbyev can be the translator for Marina Oswald. That didn't go so well. So Derbyev writes a letter to Hoover 2 weeks after the assassination. It says that the KGB killed JFK. He tries to pin it all on JFK. Derbyev has a son who goes on to start the Troika Laundromat. But that part, I figured that out after. That was a lot of detective work. But the son is named Peter Derby, not Derbyev, but Peter Derby. Piotr Derbyev is the father. Peter Derby is the son. So the reward, 40 years later, 50 years later, is the concession for the first commercial bank in the Soviet Union after the fall, and the first investment bank, and probably the largest money laundering operation of the late 1990s, early 2000s.
I just wanted, Bill, that's awesome. I love because I forgot about Derbyev, but I just want to do the receipts real quick. And if you make this big, this is Leimnitzer talking about task. This is right from the report to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And Leimnitzer is talking about Lansdale with task 33. And task 33A is not the bioweapons, but task 33B is the bioweapons. And this raid, right, is described. I'm doing it the wrong way. Okay. This raid is described in this book, but this comes right from the Joint Chiefs notes, right? So, and I'm on this like really closely, and I'm looking at all these U.S. White House notes and so forth, and I'm looking at how Lansdale, when he gets shut down, and I know it's McDuff that shut him down, because McDuff was the only one on this case. They were running this out of Lancome, across the, Lake Pontchartrain over there. When you see it in the movie, the JFK movie, and they're cooking up the bioagents and they're flying it into Cuba, right? And who's the guys that do the raid, right? In June or maybe July 1st, 1963, before the assassination, it's FBI that does the raid out there, that shuts that down, right? I don't know where if John went away or not, but
I'm here. I just wanted to let you. I wanted to let people see that. I'm going to solo you, George, so we can.
Yeah, 291 is the program review of the Chief of Operations, Operation Mongoose. You can see where it comes from. It comes from the actual White House records, September 1962. This is the Bobby Kennedy working group. So, and there's our good friend. What a handsome devil, huh? But see, McDuff shuts him down, right? Because McDuff's on the Cuba working group. He's the one that's tasked with doing the invasion. And now he's what the hell are these other jamokes doing over in Lancome with all these bioagents? And why are they flying their own C-123s? And we have Bill Patrick saying at Fort Detrick, saying he prepared the equine encephalitis, the Venezuelan equine encephalitis, the VEE, for the drops. So we know that they're doing bios without the approval of John F. Kennedy. Now, who are you going to put on that case? McDuff's already doing the invasion with Krulak, right? And we got these other jamokes doing the bioagents, blowing our thing. And now we're going to get called out on the world stage for violating the Bioweapons Convention. And they're going to hang that on us. They just got done hanging Bay of Pigs on us. Now they're going to hang bioagents on us. And the Russians got this doctor who then goes back and somehow gets a visa. This Cuban doctor somehow gets a visa and goes back to this agent in Dallas who's in the 488. We don't know his name yet. I'm trying to find his name. And that because the agent gets it on his hands, and then all of a sudden his son gets really sick. He has a meningitis or something. His son's about ready to die, and none of the doctors can figure it out. And this Cuban doctor from the town that got sprayed with the C-123 goes back and he does the diagnosis, and the kid doesn't die. Now, imagine the odds of that. How could that possibly happen? The guy who gets sprayed by the Lansdale C-123 is then back in Dallas, where the plane, got its purchase or its command or its orders, and he does the diagnosis of the guy who kicked the VEE out the door, or whatever the agent was, and that's what made his son sick. The Russians were trying to get the proof on Operation Mongoose and hang that on Kennedy. That's my theory. Otherwise, that couldn't possibly happen. How could the Cuban doctor find his way into the United States? How could he find the kid? How could he find the 488 agent, right? And how could he know who was on that plane? They had to have some intelligence operatives in there. Durbiev or somebody had to be Nosenko. Somebody had to have the intelligence to go and send that guy to the right door. So this is the exciting thing I'm working on right now. I don't have the guy's name yet, but Dave Underdown has a lot of great intelligence on this. Dave, tell me who ran the 488, if you'd be so kind. I can't remember. He ran the Dallas Police Department as well. But Cabell, right? Cabell with the Texas School Book Depository, right? Also is mayor, right? And the other major is the other guy who's running the 111th Intel. They're running this operation, and the cover is these Dallas Police Department guys. Jack Crichton, that's the guy. Jack Crichton, Crichton.
Yeah.
Anyway, if you want to work on a great mystery, this is going to be one that uncorks a whole bunch of history here.
That's new stuff, and it's always fun to get into some new stuff. And thanks for holding up those references. I want to see more about this, George. There's another book in this, I think.
Well, I'll just point out, I got a whole list of Cubans in Dallas. Then there's a whole. They work for this Malcolm Jerry Hoy fellow. He worked with in the same plant as Frank Sturgis associate, and there was I forget what the acronym. The acronym is SPFE, the Second Proletariat Fountain Army, were anti-Castros. They met in Fort Worth and in Dallas all the time. There was a contingent of them there, and they knew Frank Sturgis very well because he was running guns for them a couple of years earlier. But you could imagine a lot of Cuban intelligence on the ground and Russian intelligence.
Let me try that solo there, George. Hang on. Keep it there. George, it's the time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You were muted.
I thought it was Ken Hale. I thought Ken Hale was the kid who almost died because, he's a little touched. And I thought it was Robert Allen Hale that was in the 488, but I don't know yet. I'm looking. I'm trying to find it.
Well, We
Sorry.
went down to the National Archives, George, and we did that research on the Scarbeck case, and there's a right in front of the archives. There's inscribed on one of the marble stones there. It says, "Past is prologue," and that's, I think that's Shakespeare. I don't know exactly who, but it means to me that if you don't know the past, you're not going to be able to sort out the future. And by studying what we're doing now, we have a chance to make a better future. If we don't study this stuff, then we're going to be lost. Just like I was lost. I think we've all been intentionally bamboozled. And to dig through this stuff together, it's really like it's an honor and a privilege. And from Bill, we've had so much fun digging into the Gibson Island characters, but also the reality of finance, the reality of what's really going on when we talk about the Lazard and the Mac in New York, and all of the things that have happened. And it just seems like there's this anonymous they that does these things. But it's not an anonymous they. It's real people, like Bill was saying about the Zionism. It's, it might be a small number, but they're very, very powerful. They're so powerful that they keep us confused. So this is the work that we're doing, and I'm really proud to be a part of it. So, guys, Bill Taylor, anything you'd like to add before we wrap up the show tonight? I know it's just gone by so quickly, but
yeah, it went by quick. No, it's the Cuban doctor thing is very interesting. As I said, there's a lot of Cubans running around Dallas at that point, and I think that there is a doctor or two that I see on the list, because the FBI kept pretty good track of everybody running around, and this is before there's an assassination. Then they stopped caring, or that's when things went into hiding. So with the new FBI, with the new files that come out, everybody's looking for the smoking gun in the JFK files that have come out the past couple of years. But there's some real gems in there, and they're just names. But you see these names in other places, and you're getting closer. I just put a piece out on just Twitter a little while ago, just about the Jerry Hoy connections to the Murphy family. And all the mobster type stuff that the Murphy Snyder family is up to. And, if anybody could, check that out, you get a laugh on Twitter at least, because we like to make fun of the Murphys.
Oops, I lost everybody. Come back, Bill. Come back, George. All right, guys. Thank you all very much. Bill, George, you mentioned earlier today that Andy was going to see his cardiologist, and I didn't get a report from this. How is Andy doing?
He's doing good. There's this thing where the heart will create a second connection, and they need to do an ablation to, cut that thing that's sending the bad signals. So ablation is what he needs to do. And it's a risky thing. It's kind of like cutting those bomb wires, in the movie with MacGyver. You don't want to cut too many of them.
Yeah.
So, but he's doing okay. He wants to get off these, the drugs.
Blood thinners.
Yeah, and he just thinks that he's a subdued person. He's 70% of Andy. That's his words. So he wants to get off that and onto the ablation. So that's where we are. But he's a trooper. He came in. We did the show 2.5 hours today. It was great. It was really fun research day today. And I don't normally get a chance to go back in time, in this Cold War. So I'm sorry if I appeared a little too excited, because I normally am doing, Trump, maybe getting perp walked on March 4th. So this is kind of fun with you guys to go back in time a little bit.
Well, it sure is fun for me, as I fill out the details of my dad's career, and the whole point that I started this with 5 years ago, and is that if we can see and honestly see what happened, what they did to my dad, then we'll see what they're doing to the country, and that's going to help us to unpack it. And we've got to unpack it and get back on track for the great country that we really know that we should be, and we can be, and we will be. once we unpack all of this deep state trouble.
Agreed. 100%.
All right, Bill Taylor, George Webb, and we'll see you guys again soon, I hope. Maybe next Wednesday I'll get David Cranmer Underdown to come back, and George and perhaps George will join us again.
I'll have that doctor. I'll have that doctor's name for you next week.
Okay, cool. All right, everybody. Thanks for being with us. I'll see you tomorrow night, at 8 p.m. Eastern Time for our Exploring Wellness series with Nick, Carmadoc, and Marcia. See you then.